Well, hey everyone, it's another 100 Years of Movies. This time we're going to be tackling 1995 to 2005. We're very, very close to the end of the year where we're going to get to 2018. There's only going to be one more video after this, unfortunately, in our 100 Years of Movies. But today we're going to talk about each of my favorite movies from 1995. I'm going to pick each one from each consecutive year all the way up to 2005. So there's a lot of honorable mentions I want to get out of the way and talk about as quick as possible because this could be a long video. Alright, so let's start off with our honorable mentions for 1995. There's quite a few films that I really enjoyed. Let's talk about the first one, a recent update and addition to my collection, 12 Monkeys with Bruce Willis, and we have Brad Pitt. This is a Terry Gilliam film. I really enjoyed this movie. It's probably one of my favorite Terry Gilliam films. It's a really great science fiction, kind of futuristic dystopian. It's a really fun time, and I definitely highly recommend checking it out. Alright, so next we're going to talk a little bit about another honorable mention I have, Apollo 13. This is with Tom Hanks. You have Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton in it as well, Ed Harris and Gary Sinise. This is a classic film that you probably have seen in high school, and I really enjoyed kind of the dramatic elements of the mission itself, and so this is a really great film, and I definitely highly recommend checking out Apollo 13 if you haven't seen it. Alright, another film that I have on my honorable mentions is a classic for me, and it's one of my first rated R films that I've ever seen, and that is Braveheart. So this is the Sapphire series edition with Mel Gibson starring as William Wallace, this Scot who will not call it quits. It's a really, really fun time, highly inaccurate, but really, really fun if you haven't seen it. It's one of my first movies that I ever watched when I was really, really young, and I enjoyed every second of it, and all I have to say is, freedom! Alright, next is a recent watch. Another honorable mention is Casino. I really recently just seen this movie, Martin Scorsese's Casino. You've got Joe Pesci in here, you got Robert De Niro, and you also have Sharon Stone. I enjoyed this movie. It's violent as hell, and it's definitely a Scorsese film if I've ever seen one. The very, very end is just super violent, especially in that cornfield. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've never seen Casino. I really enjoyed this, and for fuck's sake, they curse a lot. Alright, another movie on my honorable mentions list for 1995 is the movie called Heat. Michael Mann's Heat. I really, really enjoyed this movie. This is just a straight up awesome, amazing action film with Val Kilmer, Al Pacino, and Robert De Niro. I absolutely love this movie, and if you haven't seen it, there's some amazing action sequences in this movie that you should definitely check out. Definitely check out Heat because it's a really, really great time. Alright, another honorable mention on my 1995 list is a Japanese movie called Ghost in the Shell. It's an anime, and it's was recently remade into a live action with Scarlett Johansson playing the main character. I really enjoyed this anime quite a bit, and I actually like the anime quite more, obviously, than the updated version. But I would highly recommend you checking out Ghost in the Shell if you've never seen it before or really don't know much about it. It's definitely one of those movies you can start out. If you don't really know anime too well, it's something to start off with, and it's definitely one of those futuristic sci-fi films that is looking at a dystopian world and looking at what robots and cybernetics can do to people, and possibly what could possibly be in our future. So who knows? Definitely check out Ghost in the Shell. The next two are a couple of animated films that came out, one being a Disney film, the first one being Pocahontas. I really enjoyed this movie. Not terribly accurate, but it's a really, really fun time. I've seen this movie probably 100 times when I was younger. I absolutely know a lot of the amazing songs, The Colors of the Wind. I just, I know these things, and I'm sure you do too. So, you've seen Pocahontas, definitely check it out. Another one is a classic from Disney and Pixar, and that's Toy Story. This is when the Dream Team teamed up, and you got Woody and Buzz. When I say Dream Team, I'm talking about Disney and Pixar. And you get this amazing film in Toy Story with really great computer animation and a lot of just great, wonderful cheer and excitement involved in this movie. My last two on my honorable mentions are really, really hard to pick, but I picked it as an honorable mention. That's The Usual Suspects. It's got a great cast right here. We got Stephen Baldwin, Gabriel Byrne, Chaz Palminteri, Kevin Pollak, Pete Postlethwaite, Kevin Spacey, Susie Amos, Benicio del Toro. I really love this movie, and it's a trip, and if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give anything away. Definitely check out Usual Suspects. And the last movie on my honorable mentions list is something that, yeah, it's an honorable mentions, and I'm sorry it's not my favorite, but it is the awesome, amazing movie in Seven. This is directed by David Fincher and is starring Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. I absolutely love this movie. It's based on murders that are going on throughout the city, based on the seven deadly sins. And it's a fantastic movie. It's really dark, and you can tell it was made in the 90s because it has that 90s aesthetic to it, and I really absolutely love it. So what beat out 7? It's something really, really stupid, and a lot of people are going to probably hate me for picking this, but it's my list, it's my favorite, and trust me, the rest of the list from 1996 on will not be as stupid, I promise. That movie I'm talking about is Adam Sandler's Billy Madison. I absolutely love this movie. I quote it with my friends all of the time. This is Adam Sandler at his best. Even if you don't like Adam Sandler, I can understand that. I can completely understand that. But this is where he was at the top of his game right after SNL, and this is something that he just more or less made with his friends, and it's got a lot of stupid humor in it. It's absolutely ridiculous. A lot of the one-liners I just constantly quote to me and my friends. It's just something that I've seen over and over and over again, and that's why it's my favorite movie from 1995. All the other movies that I've talked about are definitely big contenders for my 1995 pick. An actual pick, probably objectively, would probably be 7. But I'm going to subjectively say Billy Madison is my favorite. Now, go find it's October now. Oh, go back to school to prove to Dad that I'm not a fool. That's my picks for 1995. Alright, so we're going to go to 1996 now. We're talking about a lot more movies as well. So honorable mentions for 1996, there's quite a few. So for 1996, there's not as many movies I'm going to talk about for honorable mentions, but the top spot is a really fantastic one. But the first one that I'm going to talk about for honorable mentions is Wes Anderson's Bottle Rocket. It's his debut film with the Wilson brothers. We've got Luke and Owen in it as well. But you also have Robert Musgrave as Bob. This is Wes Anderson more or less starting off his entire filmography, and with the Wilsons especially, he has reoccurring cast. It's just these three going on a really, really crazy adventures, and it's definitely have elements of early Wes Anderson, and he eventually comes out of his shell in this movie, and I really love Bottle Rocket. It's a fun time, and if you haven't seen it, it's definitely one of those films that you can't really tell it's Wes Anderson, but you can kind of tell it's Wes Anderson, This next movie is a movie that got Billy Bob Thornton on the map a little bit more, and that is with Sling Blade. This is a fantastic film. Absolutely love it. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's definitely one of those movies, kind of like Forrest Gump in the way where you're dealing with someone who has a mental illness, and he is dealing with the circumstances that are around him. But this is a little bit more serious than Forrest Gump, and so definitely check out Sling Blade if you have never seen this. It's directed by Billy Bob Thornton too, as I believe, and it stars for him as well. So it's a great movie. All right, the last two movies on my honorable mentions. The first one being Sleepers. This movie is a fantastic movie that I feel like is really underrated and a lot of people don't talk about. It's got an all-star cast, as you can see. You got Kevin Bacon, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Brad Pitt, and Jason Patric. There's just a really nefarious thing happens at the beginning of this movie, and it haunts them for the rest of their life. Check this movie out if you've never seen it. Alright, the last movie on my honorable mentions list is one of my more favorite movies, especially to watch during this time of year, near October, and that is Scream. Now this is a horror movie that is making fun of all the slashers, but also at the same time being very serious. And it's a very fun movie. You have Ghostface, and he kills a lot of people, and he calls you and he asks you what your favorite scary movie is, and it's just a fun time. If you haven't seen Scream, definitely check out the first one. Alright, so what is my favorite movie from 1996, you ask? My favorite movie from 1996 is a Coen brother amazing movie called Fargo. I absolutely love this movie. Fargo is one of my favorite movies of all time. Frances McDormand plays a cop up in Fargo, and she has to find out who the killers are. William H. Macy hires these two goons, one of them being Steve Buscemi, and they're just really slimy, and they're just trying to hire to kidnap his wife, but they accidentally kill his wife, and so it goes crazy from there. It's just really loopy. It's a really dark film. It's a dark comedy, if anything, because of all the dialogue that the Coen brothers created with this movie. I thought that this was one of the more brilliant movies, one of the more brilliant screenplays there actually ever has been, and I actually think that the Coen brothers, this might be one of my favorite Coen brothers movies of all time, but I also really love the television series that it spawned off. But also, the Roger Deakins has done the cinematography for this movie, and it is just phenomenal. I recently saw this in Alma Drafthouse, actually, at a movie event, and I thought it was just wonderful seeing it in the big screen, and I can't believe that it came out, you know, as late as it did in 1996. So this is my pick for 1996. Definitely check out Fargo if you've never seen this movie, because it is a great time. You'll laugh, you'll cringe a little bit, you'll get a little grossed out, but overall you'll figure out what the mystery of Fargo is. Alright, so 1997, I have quite a few honorable mentions to talk about. The first one being an amazing film with Harrison Ford, Air Force One. He's the president, he wants to get these terrorists off his freaking plane. Gary Oldman, get off. Alright, the next movie is a great film by P.T. Anderson, and that is Boogie Nights. I really love Mark Wahlberg's performance in this movie. You have Don Cheadle, you have John C. Reilly, you have William H. Macy. There's so many people in this movie, and I'm going to just read the back. Philip Seymour Hoffman's in it, Burt Reynolds is in it, and Julianne Moore. It's just such a great cast. I heard that Burt Reynolds was really hard to work with, actually, in this movie. But I really love Boogie Nights, and I really love P.T. Anderson, and so definitely check out Boogie Nights if you haven't seen it. Another honorable mention is a great science fiction film, and that is In Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. This is a really great film, and especially if you are understanding what Carl Sagan wrote about and Neil deGrasse Tyson, Contact is something you should check out if you have not seen this. This is a really fantastic film. Alright, next on my honorable mentions list is another science fiction movie, and that is Gattaca. This is with Ethan Hawke, and you have Uma Thurman. They actually met on this, and then they married a little bit later on than that. And Jude Law as well. This is a really great science fiction, kind of future dystopian kind of world, and it kind of led rise to The Matrix, which we might talk about a little bit later. I really love Gattaca. Alright, next is a neo-noir film, and that is LA Confidential. Noir really hasn't been a thing in the 90s, but LA Confidential kind of brought it a little bit back. You've got Kevin Spacey, Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce, Danny DeVito in it, and Kim Basinger. It's a really great mystery, and it's definitely worth your time checking out LA Confidential. Next we have another murder kind of mystery thing in it, and that is directed by David Fincher again. And that is The Game with Michael Douglas, and we also have Sean Penn in this movie. I think this movie is fantastic, and is just a crazy, crazy number of twists and turns, and definitely something you should check out if you haven't seen The Game. We're going to go to a little bit more lighter in tone, to an animated film, Hercules, that I really, really enjoyed. Once again, highly inaccurate as Disney normally is, but it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen Hercules. It's a fun movie. It's just one of those Disney animated movies. This is like during the renaissance of Disney during the 90s. So definitely check out Hercules. Alright, the next three movies are the ones that I actually had in contender for being my top spot, but are not my top. And the first one being Titanic. James Cameron made a fantastic film in Titanic. I used to have this on VHS. It was a double VHS, and it's just ridiculous how long this movie is. About Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. You know what Titanic is. It's a fantastic film. Really long one, and a really crazy one as well. And based on true events that really happened. The last two are, one's a foreign film and one's an anime. And the first one is Life is Beautiful. I just recently saw this for the first time, and what an amazing film. What an amazing Italian film that really explores the lighter side of concentration camps and Jewish life in Italy, especially the last half of the film. This is a really dark film, but also a really light film, especially when it is dealing with the subject matter that it's dealing with. Check out Life is Beautiful if you not seen this movie. If you don't like foreign films, suck it up and watch this movie, because Life is Beautiful is an amazing film and is really worth your time, and it'll touch you in a good way in the heart. Alright, the next film is the movie that I really would like to pick as my favorite, but it's not. But it is definitely my favorite Studio Ghibli film, and that is Princess Mononoke. I absolutely love this movie, and I love how Miyazaki combined nature elements with humans and how they clash together, and this is one of the more dark Studio Ghibli films. This is definitely more geared towards teenagers and adults. But if you have not seen Princess Mononoke or any of the Studio Ghibli films, I highly recommend it. This is personally my favorite one. I absolutely love the aesthetics of this. I love all of the art and the animation, and it's definitely worth your time if you have not seen Princess Mononoke. Alright, so what beat out all those films? The movie, Gus Van Sant's Good Will Hunting. Kind of just the typical response from a lot of people who've seen this movie. Yeah, it's really worth it, and I really love this movie. This is why it's my pick for 1997. I really love Robin Williams' performance, and Matt Damon as well, kind of coming out of his shell, becoming this janitor who wants to get into MIT, and also just has a violent past about him, and with his relationships that he's had with Ben Affleck. Obviously, I'm talking about his friends and family in the movie itself, but it really explores that human condition of, you know, what others expect of us and what we expect of them, and a lot of just really hard times. And I really absolutely love how Gus Van Sant covers this movie with just so much, I don't know, it's one of those movies that makes you feel good and it makes you really emotional at the same time. So I really loved Good Will Hunting. As cliche as it is, it's a really great film, and I highly recommend it. This is it's my pick for 1997. Definitely check out Good Will Hunting. All right, so moving on to 1998, we're going to go through some of our honorable mentions. The first one being a great Wes Anderson film in Rushmore. It's actually one of my favorite Wes Anderson films, Rushmore. We have Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray as the principal main casts in this, and it's a really fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely Wes Anderson in his prime. He kind of just figured out his style, and this is what this movie's all about. All right, so the next film to talk about for honorable mentions is actually a great film by Terrence Malick, and that's The Thin Red Line. This is a film about the war in Vietnam, and it's highly, highly beautiful. I absolutely love the way that Terrence Malick shoots his films, and gets really in depth with a lot of the characters. This one is a little bit more of a character study than it is visually beautiful like Tree of Life. But I would highly recommend checking out Thin Red Line if you have not seen this movie. Next is a debut film from Christopher Nolan, that is Following. I actually really, really enjoyed this mystery that kind of we'll get into in a second with Memento when we get to that year. But it kind of reminded me of a lot of things just going on, and you kind of have to piece it together. And that's what Christopher Nolan's all about. And that's where you can see the blueprints of this happen in Following. So definitely check out this if you have not seen it. The next one on my list for honorable mentions is a film that is foreign that I absolutely really love, and that is Run, Lola, Run. I absolutely love this film from Tom Tykwer, I want to say. It's a German film. It's a really, really great movie about things piecing together. Three different timelines happening with different principal characters, and they all collide together, and it's a fantastic film. If you haven't seen Run, Lola, Run, you should check it out because it's worth your time. Okay, the next film on my honorable mentions is The Truman Show. I absolutely loved how Jim Carrey went from this slapstick kind of comedian to something that is definitely still in his kind of era to something more serious, and that is with The Truman Show. Now, this is a great film, and it's a great film to study for philosophy. I actually watched it in my philosophy introduction class years and years ago, so I really, really enjoyed the performance from Jim Carrey, and also just the way this was set up, and getting that solipsistic kind of view of the world and seeing that outside his bubble. And so it's definitely worth your time if you haven't seen Truman Show. All right, the last two honorable mentions are huge ones, and I'm sorry that they're not the pick, but that's the case. The first one being a great Coen Brothers movie in The Big Lebowski. This movie is just so funny, and it's just, you know, it's about the dude, man, you know? And so, you understand this, Jeff Bridges is the dude. You got John Goodman as well. You got Julianne Moore, you got Steve Buscemi, you got John Turturro. There's so many great actors in this movie, and it's just such a memorable movie. It has so many one-liners, kind of like along the lines of how Fargo is. It's definitely comedic, it's a dark comedy, but there's a lot of serious things going on in it as well. So definitely check out Big Lebowski if you have not seen this movie. All right, the last honorable mention is a huge one, and it's definitely one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is Saving Private Ryan. This movie is a fantastic movie by Steven Spielberg. It might be my favorite movie by Steven Spielberg. We have Tom Hanks, who is Private Ryan. From the opening shot, you have D-Day, which is one of the best camera work you will ever see, because apparently a lot of the people who watched this movie as it came out, who were also veterans, had a lot of PTSD, did not want to watch it, or they watched it and they said that was very accurate to how it was on the beach. Just bodies and bodies and blood and bullets and ringing and just bombs and hearing everything. It's a viewing that is definitely, it'll take a toll on you, and it's very realistic, and it's a really great film. I highly recommend checking out Saving Private Ryan, especially if you like wartime films. If not, still watch this movie because this is a required watch. Alright, so what beat out Saving Private Ryan? My favorite movie with Edward Norton, American History X. This movie was directed by Tony Kaye, which I actually have not seen very many movies with him. But Edward Norton is this ex-neo-Nazi who just got out of prison and is going back home to his former friends and family. His little brother is also kind of a neo-Nazi and is getting into the culture more and more, and Edward Norton is more or less trying to get him out of that. And you have a really fantastic take of storytelling, because it goes back and forth between past and present. It's non-linear, it's really creative, it's really impactful, it's really gritty. It's something that you will not forget, the things that happen in this movie, and I really enjoy the message of this. Trying to beat racism the best way you can, and through Reformation, this movie is a really, really impactful movie, bringing forth that message. And I absolutely love American History X, and really recommend you watching it. The movie is not very comfortable to watch, and I bet if you haven't seen it, you are in for a treat, but also at the same time, you're in for a rough ride. So check out American History X. That's what is my pick for 1998. So let's talk about 1999, a huge year for movies. All right, for 1999, I'm gonna try to go through this as quick as possible. One, I'm gonna talk about my first movie that I have on my list for honorable mentions, Wonder Boys. I absolutely love this movie. It's on DVD. Make it on Blu-ray. Somebody. Criterion. Somebody. Make it on Blu-ray. For the love of God, check out Wonder Boys. It's really great. Another movie that I have here is The Sixth Sense. This is one of my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movies. It's probably one of the best ones. Everyone knows the twist. I did a review of it. Check it out. All right, another movie on my honorable mentions list is a really tough one to watch, and that's Magnolia. P.T. Anderson. This was at the height of movies that kind of put a lot of stories together that are kind of cohesive and also kind of related. Magnolia is one of the best ones. It's one of my favorite performances by Tom Cruise, and I think it's actually might be his best, personally. So Magnolia, check it out. Next is a movie that is directed by the same guy who made Shawshank Redemption, and that is The Green Mile. Michael Clark Duncan is just fantastic, and so is Tom Hanks. And if you haven't seen this movie, you should definitely check it out. It's really, really trippy. If you haven't checked out Green Mile, I mean, come on, where are you? All right, next movie is, and I don't talk about it, so check it out. All right, so the next on my honorable mentions list is a movie, one of Stanley Kubrick's last film, and that is Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. It's kind of a dark movie, it's very sexual, and a movie that not everyone loves, but I absolutely love it, and I think you should check it out if you haven't seen it. Moving on from a less dark spot, we have 10 Things I Hate About You. I really, really loved this movie. We have Julia Stiles and Heath Ledger. It's a really, really fun rom-com, and definitely one of the best ones of all time. Definitely check out 10 Things I Hate About You. Next two movies we're going to talk about are honorable mentions are animated, and that is Toy Story 2 and Tarzan, both Disney and Disney Pixar. Toy Story 2 is probably my least favorite Toy Story, but it's definitely worth recommending. And Tarzan is probably one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. I absolutely love the Phil Collins soundtrack, and I really love just how memorable this movie is, and definitely one of the more fun Disney movies in the 90s golden era of Disney, in my opinion. Another honorable mention is another animated classic, this one directed by Brad Bird. This is The Iron Giant. People who are really big fans of this movie are right. This movie is fantastic, it's heartwarming, and it's heartfelt for an animated film, so check out The Iron Giant. Next on my honorable mentions list is a really great movie by Spike Jonze, and that is Being John Malkovich. I absolutely love this movie. It's so quirky. John Cusack and obviously John Malkovich is in this as well. It's a really, really crazy love story, reminiscent of what would later become Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind for me. I really love how creative this movie is and how playful it is, just playing with being in John Malkovich's body and how different characters use him for different means, and it's really, really great time. Definitely check out Being John Malkovich if you haven't seen it. Another honorable mentions on my 1999 list is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, The Blair Witch Project. What a simple concept, and it only could have come out during this time, which I thought was perfect. Such a low budget. A lot of people believe this actually happened, and it's definitely worth checking out if you have never seen this movie. It's shaky cam, so if you can get over that, definitely worth your time. Check out Blair Witch Project. I'm talking about the original one. All right, the last movie on my honorable mentions list might be my best, the best movie of the year, but it's not my favorite, and that is American Beauty. This movie is fantastic. It's got a great cast with Kevin Spacey, Annette Bening, with a whole bunch of other people, which I'm literally forgetting right now off the top of my head. Thora Birch, Peter Gallagher, Wes Bentley, Chris Cooper, Allison Janney as well. It is a really fantastic film about suburbia and just a lot of the xenophobia and hate involved with society during this time period and continue today. But this movie really tackles a really deep issue, and I think this movie is wonderful. It's beautiful. That's why it's got American Beauty in the name. So what beat out American Beauty? The movie that beat out American Beauty is the first Matrix. Not these two. We're talking about the first Matrix. Talk about a movie that set a precipice for a lot of the science fiction that would come after it. Now, Gattaca came before The Matrix, but I think The Matrix is the one that kind of set the ground rules for a lot of the things that would come in computer animation and also just sci-fi writing. And I really loved this movie. You have the Wachowski brothers at the time, now they're sisters, but Neo, you have this character, Neo, who is stuck in this Matrix, stuck in this altered reality. Morpheus steals him out, Lawrence Fishburne, and you just see Keanu Reeves become more or less Jesus, because there's a lot of religious allegories to what this movie's about. But it's definitely worth your time. It's really, really cool. A lot of amazing action sequences in this film. A lot of just groundbreaking things and techniques that were for its time, and it set the precipice for a lot of the things coming in the future. Absolutely love The Matrix, and the first Matrix is definitely worth your time. It's got a great thriller. It's got a lot of mystery to it as well. There's a lot of just great elements to this movie. Check out The Matrix. That's why it's my pick for 1999. All right, now we're to the year 2000. We're at the turn of the century. I have quite a few honorable mentions. I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as possible. The first one being an amazing Japanese film in Battle Royale. This is Hunger Games version 1. Check out Battle Royale if you haven't seen it. It's really crazy. I love it. It's just this island full of kids trying to kill each other until one survives. It's fantastic. Next is another foreign film that I recently saw, Amores Perros. This is directed by Inarritu and is one of his first films, and is an absolute wonder, and is a fantastic film if you haven't seen it. It's a great film about 3 different characters, all kind of a little bit connected. The next movie is a classic, one of my first rated R films, just like when I watched Braveheart, and that is Gladiator with Russell Crowe. This is a fantastic steelbook. Ridley Scott directed this movie, and is a really great time. Has some flaws to it, but it's definitely one of the best soundtracks of all time, and one of the best action sequences of all time. And so definitely check out Gladiator if you haven't seen it. Joaquin Phoenix is nuts in this movie. Next is a really, really fun movie by Guy Ritchie, and that is Snatch. I absolutely love this movie. It's probably one of my favorite Guy Ritchie films. Brad Pitt is just a pikey. You just have a bunch of people doing a bunch of British and Irish things, and it's absolutely wonderful. Check it out. It's one of those dark crime films that's really, really funny and comedic as well. Now we're gonna go talk about a hard-to-watch film, and that is Requiem for a Dream. This movie is directed by Darren Aronofsky. This is one of his first films. This is super dark, and it's a movie that I only want to watch one time in my life, maybe once every 10 years, and is just a movie about addiction and all the people who just fall victim to that. It's hard to watch, but it's definitely a necessary watch. You should see Requiem for a Dream, but also not see it again after that. Maybe you are a glutton for pain, who knows? All right, next is a movie I foreshadowed a little earlier, and I want to talk a little bit about it when I talked about Following, and that is Memento. So Memento takes a little deeper dive of where Guy Pearce has to piece together this day and what happened to him and his wife, and there's a lot of craziness about this movie, and it's really, really fun, and definitely something you should piece together yourself. Next is the most recent movie I've seen on my list, and that is Almost Famous. This is a really fun movie about a band who doesn't exist, but the band actually exists, but it's a different fictional name. I don't know, it's really, really fun. It's about this kid who's this journalist, and he's going touring with this band in the 1970s. Next is more or less my entire work life at the record store that I worked at in High Fidelity. This movie with John Cusack has very, very accurate part of my life when I worked at the record store, and has a lot of the characters that are reminiscent of the employees that I worked with, myself, but this is about love and loss, but also music and why it's so damn important. So check out High Fidelity if you haven't seen it. Next on my honorable mentions is a classic, and that is Castaway. We have Wilson as the volleyball, and we also have Tom Hanks, who is castaway on this island, and just seeing him survive. It's a really great classic movie of survival, and has a really great ending as well. Next is a movie that I think is really great, and is a great twist with Christian Bale with American Psycho. This movie is crazy. It's a very postmodern kind of film where you have this guy who is Upper East Side, who's really, really rich, but also at the same time psychotic in this business world on Wall Street. And this is a fantastic and deadly film. It's really fun, and I really love the ending. It's sadistic as well, and apparently the book is even more fucked up. So check this movie out if you haven't seen it. Next is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is In the Mood for Love. This is on my honorable mentions, only because the movie that I have ahead of it, I've seen a million times. But In the Mood for Love is a Hong Kong film that is really, really great. It's a really, really dark and realistic look on how life is and how romances blossom and also wilt. And so definitely check out In the Mood for Love if you've never seen this movie. Yes, it's foreign, but I highly recommend this. I would say this is a required watch. It's something that you should see if you're a fan of cinema, and check it out if you have not seen it. All right, the movie that I picked for 2000, my favorite movie of 2000 is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? We got Coen Brothers movie. Coen Brothers is coming in strong. I absolutely love this movie. It is the reason that I actually like bluegrass a little bit, and I'm not a big fan of bluegrass. We got George Clooney, we have John Turturro, Tim Blake Nelson, and even John Goodman is fantastic as kind of the Cyclops character. They're taking the Odyssey and putting it in the Americana of the early 1930s, kind of that Depression era, and you just see this journey of Ulysses, who's going on this quest pretty much to find his wife again and get back, you know, his former life. And it's just, it's hilarious. It's really dark as well, but it's got this really great cinematography as well. Roger Deakins comes back again to do the cinematography of this. The sepia tone kind of set the standard for a lot of the movies that came after this as well, and I thought this movie did a fantastic job of just having memorable one-liners, memorable cast, lovable characters, and even lovable enemies of this movie as well. And it just shined a light on how primitive some of the things were from that time period, and can definitely resonate to today. And so it's a fun movie. It's definitely a wonderful time. If you haven't seen, check out Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? This is my pick for the year 2000s. All right, so for 2001, I'm going to make myself a rule, and that rule is that honestly, my picks for 2001, 2002, and 2003 are going to be Lord of the Rings. But I'm going to be picking another movie on top of these. So I'll talk about this when I get to Return of the King, okay? We'll get back to this. All right, so another honorable mention for 2001. The first one being a Russell Crowe film, A Beautiful Mind. It's a great, fantastic film about, you have John Nash, who is this mathematician. Ron Howard, this is probably the best film you've ever made. So definitely check out A Beautiful Mind if you haven't seen it. Next on my honorable mentions list is a really classic film with Jake Gyllenhaal, put him on the map, and that's Donnie Darko. There's a lot of annoying fans of this movie, but this movie is really good. That's all I have to say about Donnie Darko. Next is one of my favorite Del Toro films. That is The Devil's Backbone. It's a Spanish film about some ghosts in this orphanage, and I really, really love how this movie is. I really love that it is the 666 spine, because it is the Devil's Backbone. How ironic. And so, good job of Criterion on putting this out. Definitely check out Devil's Backbone if you haven't seen it. It's probably one of the best Guillermo del Toro films. Next on my honorable mentions list is another Wes Anderson film. It's probably one of my favorite ones, and that's The Royal Tenenbaums. This one is really, really fun as well. It's a lot like Rushmore in the sense that it has that Wes Anderson style, and it's definitely worth your time. It's a lot more about family dynamics and how dysfunctional all of them are. All right, next is a really, really great film with Ethan Hawke and Denzel Washington, and that's Training Day. I recently saw this a couple years ago, maybe last year I want to say, and I was not let down. This movie is fantastic. Denzel just carries this movie, more or less just training Ethan Hawke to become a cop, but you know, there's a lot of crookedness happening between all of the things that he's training to do. Next on my honorable mentions list is probably one of my favorite Disney movies, Disney Pixar combinations, and that is Monsters, Inc. I really love how Mike Wazowski and Sully are, and how scared they are of children, and I love it, and I love the premise as well. Last on my honorable mentions list is Spirited Away. This is probably objectively the best Miyazaki film. Studio Ghibli crafted this amazing film that won an Oscar, and that's how great this movie is. If you haven't seen Spirited Away, check it out. So what's the movie that is not Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings, and that is probably one of my favorite French movies of all time, Amélie. This movie is so quirky and so lovable. I really love how amazing this movie is. I love the color palettes. I love the way it's directed. It's just such a fantastic, beautiful, and like, I don't know, cute movie. It's one of those movies that I can say cute, and I never say that. It's a really innocent film, but it's also very grown up, and that's what I love so much about it. It's a really great romance film. If you haven't seen Amélie, that's why it's my pick for 2001. My other pick is Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Moving right along to 2002, we're talking about Two Towers. No, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. We're going to talk a little bit about some other honorable mentions first, and that first one being is 28 Days Later. This is a fantastic film, actually written by Alex Garland, directed by Danny Boyle, and is a really great and really scary zombie film. They're really, really fast, and if you haven't seen 28 Days Later, it'll scare the shit out of you, trust me. Alright, next on my honorable mentions list is the first in the Bourne trilogy that eventually became 5 movies, and that is The Bourne Identity. This is a really great film with Matt Damon. Who is Jason Bourne? That's all I gotta ask. Next on my list of honorable mentions is a really great film about Charlie Kaufman, and that is Adaptation. It is written by Charlie Kaufman himself. Nicolas Cage plays Charlie Kaufman. Meryl Streep and Chris Cooper are also in this movie, and this is directed by Spike Jonze, who did Being John Malkovich, and so you see Charlie Kaufman's writing really, really well in this movie. It's really, really quirky, really crazy, really fun. I really love Adaptation. Next on my list is a movie that I love by Martin Scorsese, and that is Gangs of New York. I just love how Daniel Day-Lewis plays the Butcher in this movie. It's a really fun movie. We've got Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, Liam Neeson. There's a lot of fantastic. I love the aerial shot that they have of the very opening of this movie. Check out Gangs of New York if you haven't seen it. It's a really fun time. Alright, next on my honorable mentions list is a great film with Jet Li in it, and that is Hero. This is a Chinese film. This is directed by the guy who did Great Wall, who actually directed a much better film than this, Zhang Yimou. And I love how colorful this movie is and how wonderfully told this movie is. And it's definitely a story that is being told. Jet Li is recounting towards somebody, and you kind of see midway through the film why he's talking about certain characters and how certain events transpired. It's really, really great. Hero is a fantastic time, and it's also one of the most beautifully shot films I've ever seen. Alright, next on my honorable mentions list is a great film with Tom Cruise, probably one of the best Tom Cruise performances, Minority Report. Speaking of futuristic dystopian worlds, Minority Report is one of the best, and I definitely highly recommend checking it out. Alright, next on my honorable mentions list is a fantastic film. This is actually a Chinese version. You can see it on the back, and that's The Pianist. I absolutely love Adrien Brody in this film. This is directed by Roman Polanski. Adrien Brody plays this amazing character in this war-torn city during World War II, playing the piano. Just pretty much to stay alive. It's definitely emotional, and it's definitely worth your time. Check out The Pianist if you have not seen it. Next on my honorable mentions list is probably one of my favorite of M. Night Shyamalan films, and that's Signs. This movie scared the shit out of me when I watched it for the first time. I remember that birthday scene, and I'll never forget it. Next on my honorable mentions list is another movie by P.T. Anderson, and that is Punch Drunk Love. This is Adam Sandler in a very serious role, in a romantic role, still kind of a goofball with Emily Watson. It's a fantastic movie. It's a great romance, and it's definitely not your normal, typical film, because obviously P.T. Anderson's doing it. So definitely check out Punch Drunk Love if you haven't seen it. Alright, last movie on my honorable mentions list, besides my pick, is Y2 Mama Tambien. I really loved this road movie by Alfonso Cuarón. It's just a road movie between these two guys who are just really, really horny, and this girl who is running away from a marriage that is broken. And it's just a fantastic film. It's sexy, it's gross, it's all those things, it's fun, it's adolescence, it's all those things. So check out Y2 Mama Tambien. Alright, for my pick for 2002 is the Brazilian film City of God. So this movie is so good that I've only seen it one time, and parts of it several other times. And this movie is just so crazy about capturing the culture of the people who live in Rio de Janeiro. And it has so many unapologetic things happening in this movie. There's drug culture, there's sex, there's violence, there's family, there's relationships. There's so many things going on in this movie, and it captures it so well, and it's definitely worth your time. It's one of the best foreign films of all time, and that's why City of God is probably my pick for 2002. That's not The Two Towers. So let's talk about 2003 now. So now we're going on to 2003, where we can finally talk about Return of the King, but I'm not going to get into spoilers there, not yet. First, we have some honorable mentions. We have Big Fish. This is probably one of my favorite Tim Burton films. It's really heartfelt and just coming-of-age film, and I really love it. Another one is Finding Nemo. It's probably one of the best Disney Pixar movies of all time. Finding Dory came out not living up to the potential of Finding Nemo, but a really great sequel. Finding Nemo is a really fun time. And another great honorable mention is a Korean film, Old Boy. This movie is very violent and is really sick. And Koreans, a lot of Korean film that I've seen is very similar to Old Boy and very dark and very sinister. So check out Old Boy if you haven't seen it. Speaking of violence, another honorable mention I have is Kill Bill Volume 1, my favorite of the Kill Bill series. I love Oh-rin's character in this movie. So if you haven't seen this movie, I will collect your fucking head. Sorry for all the violent threats, I'm sorry. It's the Tarantino in me. Alright, next is actually a change and shift for honorable mentions. That's Love Actually. This is a really, really fun movie with an all-star cast of all these people coming together for the holiday. It's just a feel-good movie if you haven't seen Love Actually. Next is probably one of the best Clint Eastwood movies, and that is Mystic River. Sean Penn plays a fantastic father in this movie. Kevin Bacon plays a really great character in this as well. Tim Robbins, Lawrence Fishburne. You have a lot of people in this movie. It's a really, really great movie about the East Coast and a lot of the darkness involved, and Clint Eastwood did a really fantastic job with it. Alright, so the last honorable mentions on my list is a really great movie by Sofia Coppola, and that is Lost in Translation. I really love Bill Murray in this movie. Scarlett Johansson does a fantastic job as well, and just this guy visiting Tokyo, and just more or less whatever happens in Tokyo stays in Tokyo kind of a way. So check out Lost in Translation if you haven't seen it. So we've been building it for my favorite movie from 2001, 2002, and 2003. I can gush about Lord of the Rings all I want. I absolutely love these movies. I actually think these are my favorite movies of all time. The amount of epicness on top of the amount of genres these movies cover, from science fiction to fantasy to action to romance to drama to horror. There's so many things involved in this epic, and Peter Jackson has crafted such an amazing piece of work here. Adapting J.R.R. Tolkien's novels. You have the Fellowship gathering all of the pieces together. You have Frodo, who has to carry the ring to Mount Doom to destroy it and to stop Sauron. So with Lord of the Rings, you have a lot of characters in this movie. Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Gandalf, Gimli, Legolas, Aragorn, Boromir, Faramir, the Witch King, Sauron, Saruman, Galadriel, Elrond. They're all over the place. There's so much folklore involved with this, and so much history involved with J.R.R. Tolkien's masterpiece here. And Peter Jackson crafted this in such an amazing way. I absolutely love the practical effects in this movie. I love some of the special effects as well. Even the flaw in the Oliphant when Legolas slides down. I absolutely love every element of this movie. They are my favorite movies of all time. I'm probably just going to be gushing about it the entire time. The cinematography is wonderful. The set design is wonderful. The art, the characters, I feel all of it. I feel it in the earth. I feel it in the water. Check out Lord of the Rings if you haven't seen it. It's probably my favorite movies of all time. It's my favorite trilogy, and Return of the King is my favorite movie from 2003. So now we have 2 more years to talk about, 2004 and 2005. So this is getting to be a really long video, so let's go through these honorable mentions as quick as possible. Honorable mentions for 2004, Spider-Man 2, one of my favorite chick flicks of all time, Mean Girls. We have Christian Bale, who plays this amazing character in The Machinist. Does a lot of stuff to his body. And a great Wes Anderson film, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Bill Murray does a lot of David Bowie stuff. One of the best Disney Pixar films, The Incredibles. Probably one of the best Zack Snyder films, Dawn of the Dead, and a fun remake as well. You have a really, really fun movie in Dodgeball, White Goodman. Next is Collateral, which is one of the best performances as Tom Cruise is a villain, and Jamie Foxx in it as well. Really, really great night of a movie. And then finally Closer, which is kind of a contestable movie with a lot of people, but really great performances by Jude Law, Natalie Portman, Clive Owen, and even Julia Roberts as well. So what beat those movies, you say? The movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This movie is written by Charlie Kaufman. We talked a little bit about him when we talked about adaptation. He wrote this amazing screenplay where you have Joel and Clementine, you have Kate Winslet, and you have Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is probably his best role he's ever played in this really off-kilter and kind of psychedelic and also all over the place kind of romance. And that's what Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is. I really love how all of the characters play with each other, especially with Clementine more or less trying to erase the memory of Jim Carrey, of Joel. And I absolutely love how heartfelt this movie is and how realistic it is to a lot of the relationships that we try to get in and get out of as time goes on in our lives. And it's definitely one of those movies that is really really clever and also really a really great adaptation of kind of just the traditional kind of romantic film. And I thought this was really creative and original, and I really love this movie, and that's why it is my pick for 2004. So we have one more year left, 2005. So what do we have to show? All right, so 2005, it's our last year. Finally, we are getting to the very end of this video. So let's do our honorable mentions really, really quick. We have Rian Johnson's Brick, really fantastic movie. If you have not seen this, another movie, and it's a DVD, unfortunately. Blah. V for Vendetta, definitely a really great adaptation by Alan Moore. I don't know why I said Ryan, because I was thinking of Rian Johnson. Next is another honorable mention that I absolutely love, Walk the Line. Joaquin Phoenix plays Johnny Cash. It's really fantastic. It's probably one of the best kind of dramatizations of an actual character in real life. One of my favorite movies by Shane Black, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer. Hilarious movie. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's a really great buddy cop kind of movie. Next is a really great film with Viggo Mortensen, History of Violence. I absolutely love this movie. This is by David Cronenberg. It's a fantastic movie if you have not seen it. Probably my favorite movie from George Clooney, and that's Good Night and Good Luck. We're talking about Edward R. Murrow and the time period that this happened in. It's a black and white film. Really fun movie. I really love it. Probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time, The Descent. One of the most terrifying. I saw it with my mom. I remember renting it one night back in like 2006 or 7 maybe. I love this movie though. It's really scary though, and it makes me claustrophobic. Don't like caves. And then finally, Brokeback Mountain. Really great performances by Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger. I love this this cowboy movie, and so it's a really great time. And it's definitely not traditional. And so my favorite movie for 2005 is actually one of my favorite superhero movies, and that's Batman Begins. I really love Batman Begins and Christian Bale's performance. Christopher Nolan directed this fantastic trilogy, starting with Batman Begins. Liam Neeson plays Ra's al Ghul, and you also have Christian Bale as Batman, as Bruce Wayne, and he performs really, really well as Bruce Wayne. I actually think he's the best Bruce Wayne. Now, he didn't have the ridiculous voice as much that he did in Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises in this movie, but I really loved how Christian Bale took on this performance as Batman. And I just love the action sequences in this movie. I loved the set design. It's really dark. It's definitely Christopher Nolan styled, and I absolutely love the direction that it went in the future films as well. But Batman Begins possibly might be my favorite movie of 2005. So those were my movies from 1995 to 2005. That was my 100 years of movies. This is a long video once again, just like my last one. Hopefully you were all stuck around to check out my picks. What are your picks for 1995 to 2005? I want to hear them down below. Give me a comment, like this video, share this video, don't forget to hit that notification bell, and also subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.